lips are so chapped. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hello? Where is it? Where is it? Oh my god, I got it. 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 Gotta make it back. Because I need chopstick. Bad. Hello? Raise your hand if you're scared. Me, I'm scared. The tank is clean and we are getting out of here. The tank is clean. The tank is clean. Yeah, girl, I'm scared. Hola. Every time I say hola, I have like the urge to, I don't know if y'all have seen that Rosalía video where she's like, hola, ¿cómo estáis? Estamos en Buenos Aires. And then like the plane like scream. I have like the urge to say that. Oh, thank you. I feel like I did name him in one of my lives, but I did forget the name. Anyway, I don't have a name for him. But we're gonna skip the small talk today and we're just gonna get down to the bone. Get down to, is that a saying? Get down. I don't think that's a saying. Anyway, we're just gonna get to it because we have a lot of ground to cover, y'all. It's a long one today, and the sun is not going to shine forever. So we're reading 67 through 79. So it's it's a good chunk. So let's get going. God, I'm like literally, if I could, I'm gonna take a bite of my muffin real quick because I forgot that I had this, and I'm really hungry. Hold on. I'm so scared. All right. Pop my fingers. Pop them. Okay, let's go. Oh, okay, let's go. Chapter 67. I'm so scared. Okay. Aelin and Kale helped Rowan and Adian carry the 2 urns of hellfire into the sewers, all of them barely breathing, none of them talking. Now they stood in the cool, reeking... Hold on. Let me just... I wish I wasn't like a nervous sweater, but I am. I very much am. I'm sorry. I'm a nervous sweater. Oh God. Okay. Now they stood in the cool, reeking dark, not daring a flame, with the 2 vats sitting next to them on the stone walkway. Adian and Rowan, with their fey eyesight, wouldn't need a torch anyway. Rowan shook Kale's hand, wishing him luck. When the fey prince turned to Aelin, she focused instead on a torn corner of his cloak, as if it had snagged on some long ago obstacle and had been ripped off. She kept staring at that ripped off bit of cloak as she embraced him, quickly, tightly, breathing in his scent perhaps for the last time. It's not. His hands lingered on her as if he'd hold her a moment longer, but she turned to Adian. Ash River eyes met her own, and she touched the face that was the other side of her fair coin. For Terrason, she said to him, for our family, for Marion, for us. Slowly, Adian drew his blade and knelt, his head bowed as he lifted the sword of Orinth. 10 years ago, or 10 years of shadows, but no longer. Light up the darkness, Majesty. She did not have room in her heart for tears, would not allow or yield to them. Aelin took her father's sword from him, its weight a steady, solid reassurance. Adian rose, returning to his place beside Rowan. She looked at them, at the 3 males who meant everything, more than everything. Then she smiled with every last shred of courage, of desperation, of hope for the glimmer of that glorious future. Let's go rattle the stars. I'm scared. Chapter 68. Lyssandra's carriage meandered through the packed city streets. Every block took thrice as long as usual. thanks to the streaming crowds headed to the markets and squares to celebrate the solstice. None of them were aware of what was to occur, or who was making her way across the city. Lysandra's palms turned sweaty within her silk gloves. Evangeline, drowsy with the morning heat, dozed slightly, her head resting on Lysandra's shoulder. They should have left last night, but she'd had to say goodbye. Brightly dressed revelers pushed past the carriage, and the driver shouted to clear out Sorry, I'm a nervous burper too. To clear out of the street. Everyone ignored him. God, if Aylin wanted an audience, she'd picked the perfect day for it. Lysandra peered out the window as they halted in an intersection. The street offered a clear view of the glass palace, blinding in the mid-morning sun, its upper spires like lances piercing the cloudless sky. Are we there yet? Evangeline mumbled. Lysandra stroked her arm, a wild yet pet, and she began praying to Mallow Firebringer, whose holiday had dawned so bright and clear, and to Themis, who never forgot the cage thing of this world. But she was no longer in a cage. For Evangeline, she could stay in this carriage, and she could leave this city, even if it meant leaving her friends behind. Adian gritted his teeth against the weight he held so delicately between his hands. It was going to be a damn long trek to the castle, especially when they had to ease across waterways and over crumbling bits of stone that made even their fey balance unsteady. But this was the way the wordhounds had come. If Aylin and Nesrin hadn't provided a detailed path, the lingering stench would have led the way. Careful, Rowan said over his shoulder as he hoisted the vat he carried higher and edged around a loose bit of rock. Adian bit back his retort at the obvious order, but he couldn't blame the prince. One tumble and they'd risk the various substances mixing inside. A few days ago, not trusting Shadow Market quality, Kale and Adian had found an abandoned barn outside the city to test and earn barely a tenth of the size of the ones they carried. It had worked too well. As they'd hurried back to Rifthold before curious eyes could see them, the smoke could be seen for miles. Adian shuddered to think about what a vat this size, let alone two of them, might do if they weren't careful. But by the time they rigged up the triggering mechanisms and ignited the wicks, they would trail a long distance away. Well, Adian just prayed he and Rowan were swift enough. They entered a sewer tunnel so dark that it took even his eyes a moment to adjust. Rowan just continued ahead. They were damn lucky that Lorcan had killed those wordhounds and cleared the way. Damn lucky that Aylin had been ruthless and clever enough to trick Lorcan into doing it for them. He didn't stop to consider what might happen if that ruthlessness and cleverness failed her today. They turned down another pathway, the reek now smothering. Rowan's sharp sniff was the only sign of his mutual disgust. The gateway, the iron gates were in shambles, but Adian could still make out the markings etched into them. Word marks, ancient too. Perhaps this had once been a path Gavin had used to visit the Sin Eater's temple unseen. The otherworldly stench of the creatures pushed and pulled at Adian's senses, and he paused, scanning the darkness of the looming tunnel. Here the water ended. Past the gates, a broken, rocky path that looked more ancient than any they'd seen yet sloped up into the impenetrable gloom. "Watch where you step," Rowan said, scanning the tunnel. "It's all loose stone and debris." "I can see just as well as you," Adian said, unable to stop the retort this time. He rotated his shoulder, the cuff of his tunic slipping up to reveal the word marks Aylin had instructed them to paint in their own blood all over their torsos, arms, and legs. "Let's go," was Rowan's only reply as he hauled his vat along as if it weighed nothing. Adian debated snapping a response, but perhaps that was why the warrior prince kept giving him stupid warnings, to piss him off enough to distract him, and maybe Rowan himself, from what was happening above them, what they carried between them. The old ways, to look out for their queen and their kingdom, but also for each other. Damn, it was almost enough to make him want to embrace the bastard. So Adian followed Rowan through the iron gates and into the castle catacombs. God, I'm so scared. Kale's chains clanked, the manacles already rubbing his skin raw as Aylin tugged him down the crowded street, a dagger poised to sink into his side. One block remained until they reached the iron fence that surrounded the sloping hill on which the castle perched. Crowds streamed past, not noticing the chained man in their midst or the black-cloaked woman who hauled him closer and closer to the glass castle. "You remember the plan?" Aelin murmured, keeping her head down and her dagger pressed against his side. Yes, he breathed. It was the only word he could manage. Dorian was still in there, still holding on. It changed everything, and nothing. The crowd quieted near the fence, as if wary of the black uniformed guards that surely monitored the entrance, the first obstacle they'd encounter. Aelin stiffened almost imperceptibly and paused so suddenly that Chaol almost slammed into her. Chaol. The crowd shifted, and he beheld the castle fence. There were corpses hanging from the towering wrought iron bars. Corpses in red and gold uniforms. Oh, God. Oh, God. Rest and Brullo are dead, aren't they? Oh, God. Oh, God. Rest and Brullo are dead, aren't they? Oh, my God. No. Oh, my God. Oh, my God! Oh, corpses in red and gold uniforms. Chaol. He was already moving, and she swore and walked with him, pretending to lead him by the chains, keeping the dagger tight to his ribs. He didn't know how he hadn't heard the crows jabbering as they picked at the dead flesh tied along each iron post. With the crowd, he hadn't thought to notice. Or maybe he'd just gotten used to the cawing in every corner of the city. His men. 16 of them. His closest companions. His most loyal guards. The first one had the collar of his uniform unbuttoned, revealing a chest crisscrossed with welts and cuts and brands. Rest. How long had they tortured? Y'all, torturing is a very sensitive subject for me, so I'm gonna start crying. How long had they tortured him? Tortured all the men since Adian's rescue? He racked his mind to think of the last time they'd had contact. He'd assumed the difficulty was because they were lying low, not because they were being... Chaol noticed the man strung up beside Rez. Brullo's eyes were gone. Oh my God. 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 It's not... Y'all. Oh my God. I'm gonna be sick. Oh. Since his rescue? Oh my God. It's like I'm literally gonna throw up. I'm literally gonna throw up. Ugh. Oh God. My intrusive thoughts are running away with that one. Oh God. Ugh. Either from torture or the crows. His hands were swollen and twisted. Part of his ear was missing. Cal had no sounds in his head. Ugh. No feeling in his body. It was a message. Oh my God. I'm gonna throw up. But not to Aelin, Galathinius, or Adian Ash River. His fault. His. He and Aelin didn't speak as they neared the iron gates. The death of those men lingering over them. Every step was an effort. Every step was too fast. His fault. I'm sorry, Aelin murmured, nudging him closer to the gates, where black uniformed guards were indeed monitoring every face that passed on the street. I'm so sorry. The plan, he said, his voice shaking. We change it. Now. Chaol. He told her what he needed to do. When he finished, she wiped away her tears as she gripped his hand and said, I'll make it count. The tears were gone by the time they broke from the crowd. Nothing between them and those familiar gates but open cobblestones. Home. This had once been his home. Oh my God. Bro, Rez is so nice. Oh my God. He did not recognize the guards standing watch at the gates he had once protected so proudly, the gates he had ridden through not even a year ago with an assassin newly freed from Endivere, her chains tied to his saddle. Now she led him in chains through those gates, an assassin one last time. Her walk became a swagger, and she moved with fluid ease toward the guards who drew their swords, their black rings gobbling up the sunlight. Selena Sardothian halted a healthy distance away and lifted her chin. "Tell His Majesty that his champion has returned, and she's brought him one hell of a prize." Oh. God damn it. I'm gonna be sick. God. Chapter 69. Aylin's black cloak flowed behind her as she led the fallen captain of the guard through the shining halls of the palace. Hidden at her back was her father's sword, its pommel wrapped in black cloth. None of their 10-guard escort bothered to take her weapons. Why would they, when Selena Sardothian was weeks early for her expected return, and still loyal to king and crown? The halls were so quiet. Even the Queen's court was sealed and silent. Rumor had it the Queen had been cloistered in the mountains since Adian's rescue and had taken half her court with her. The rest had vanished as well, to escape either the rising summer heat or the horrors that had come to rule their kingdom. Chaol said nothing, though he put on a good show of looking furious, like a pursued man desperate to find a way back to freedom. No sign of the devastation that had been on his face upon finding his men hanging from the gates. He jerked against the chains and she leaned in close. "I don't think so, Captain," she purred. Chaol didn't deign a response. The guards glanced at her. Word marks written in Chaol's blood covered her beneath her clothes, its human scent hopefully masking any hints of her heritage that the Valg might otherwise pick up. There were only 2 demons in this group, a small mercy. So they went up, and up into the glass castle itself. The hall seemed too bright to contain such evil. The few servants they passed averted their eyes and scurried along. Had everyone fled since Adian's rescue? It was an effort to not look too long at Chaol as they neared the massive red and gold glass doors, already open to reveal the crimson marbled floor of the king's council room, already open to reveal the king, seated on his glass throne, and Dorian standing beside him. Damn. Their faces. They were faces that tugged at him. Human filth, the demon hissed. The woman, he recognized that face as she yanked back her dark hood and knelt before the dais on which he stood. Majesty. Her hair was shorter than he remembered. No, he did not remember. He did not know her. And the man in chains beside her, bloodied and filthy. Screaming wind and enough, the demon snapped. But their faces. He did not know their faces. He did not care. The king of Ardalan, the murderer of her family, the destroyer of her kingdom, lounged in his glass throne. "Isn't this an interesting turn of events, champion?" She smiled, hoping the cosmetics she'd dabbled around her eyes would mute the turquoise and gold of her irises, and that the drab shade of blonde she'd dyed her hair would disguise its near-identical hue with Adian's. "Do you want to hear an interesting story, Your Majesty? Does it involve my enemies and Wendelin being dead? Oh, that, and much, much more." Why has word not arrived then? The ring on her finger seemed to suck in the light. On his finger, but she could spy no sign of the word keys. Couldn't feel them here, as she'd felt the presence of the one in the amulet. Chaol was pale, and kept glancing at the floor of the room. This was where everything had happened, where they'd murdered Sorstia, where Dorian had been enslaved, where, once upon a time, she'd signed her soul away to the king under a fake name, a coward's name. "Don't blame me for the piss-poor messengers," she said. "I sent word the day before I left." She pulled out 2 objects from her cloak and looked over her shoulder at the guards, jerking her chin at Chaol. "Watch him." She strode to the throne and extended her hand to the king. He reached forward, the reek of him. Valg. Human, iron, blood. She dropped 2 rings into his palm. The clink of metal on metal was the only sound. "The seal rings of the king and crown prince of Wendelin. I'd have brought their heads, but immigration officials can get so pissy." The king plucked up one of the rings, his face stony. Lysandra's jeweler had yet again done a stunning job of recreating the royal crest of Wendelin, and then wearing down the rings until they looked ancient. They're heirlooms. Like heirlooms. And where were you during Narok's attack on Wendelin? Was I supposed to be anywhere but hunting my prey? The king's black eyes bored into hers. I killed them when I could, she went on, crossing her arms, careful of the hidden blades in the suit. Apologies for not making it the grand statement you wanted. Next time, perhaps. Dorian hadn't moved a muscle, his features stone cold above the collar around his neck. And how did you wind up with my captain of the guard in chains? Cale was only gazing at Dorian, and she didn't think his distraught, pleading face was an act. He was waiting for me at the docks, like a good dog. When I saw that he was without his uniform, I got him to confess everything. Every last little conspiratorial thing he'd done, sorry. The king eyed the captain. Did he now? Aelin avoided the urge to check the grandfather clock ticking in the far corner of the room, or the position of the sun beyond the floor-to-ceiling window. Time. They needed to bide their time a bit longer. But so far so good. I do wonder, the king mused, leaning back on his throne, who has been conspiring more? The captain, or you, champion? Or should I call you... No! Ah! No! Oh my god! Oh god. Y'all. Oh my god. Y'all. Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay, so it's happening now. I was ah! Chapter 70. This place smelled like death, like hell, like the dark spaces between the stars. Centuries of... Y'all, I don't give a shit about him. Oh my god! I hate that she skipped it! Oh, she's making me wait for it. God! Centuries of training kept Rowan's steps light, kept him focused on the lethal weight he carried as he and the general crept through the dry, ancient passageway. The ascending stone path had been gouged by brutal claws, the space so dark that even Rowan's eyes were failing him. The general trailed close behind, making no sound save for the occasional pebble skittering from beneath his boots. Aelin would be in the castle by now, the captain in tow as her ticket into the throne room. Only a few minutes more. If they'd calculated right, and then they could ignite their deadly burden and get the hell out. Minutes after, he'd be at her side, rife with magic that he'd use to choke the air clean out of the king's lungs, and then he'd enjoy watching as she burned him alive, slowly. Though he knew his satisfaction would pale in comparison to what the general would feel. What every child of Terrasen would feel. They passed through a door of solid iron that had been peeled back as if massive, clawed hands had ripped it off its hinges. The walkway beyond was smooth stone. Adian sucked in a breath at the same moment the pounding struck Rowan's brain, right between his eyes. Wordstone. Aelin had warned him of the tower, that the stone had given her a headache, but this... She had been in her human body then. It was unbearable, as if his very blood recoiled at the wrongness of the stone. Adian cursed, and Rowan echoed it. But there was a wide sliver in the stone wall ahead, and open air beyond it. Not daring to breathe too loudly, Rowan and Adian eased through the crack. A large, round chamber greeted them, flanked by 8 open iron doors, the bottom of the clock tower, if their calculations were correct. The darkness of the chamber was nearly impenetrable, but Rowan didn't dare light the torch he'd brought with them. Adian sniffed, a wet sound. Wet because blood dribbled down Rowan's lip and chin. A nosebleed. "Hurry," he whispered, setting down his vat at the opposite end of the chamber. Just a few more minutes. Adian stationed his vat of hellfire across from Rowan's at the chamber entrance. Rowan knelt, his head pounding, worse and worse with each throb. He kept moving, shoving the pain down as he set the fuse wire and led it over to where Adian crouched. The dripping of their nosebleeds on the black stone floor was the only sound. Faster, Rowan ordered, and Adian snarled softly, no longer willing to be annoyed with warnings as a distraction. He didn't feel like telling the general he'd stopped doing it minutes ago. Rowan drew his sword, making for the doorway through which they'd entered. Adian backed toward him, unspooling the joined fuses as he went. They had to be far enough away before they could light it, or else they'd be turned to ash. He sent up a silent prayer to Mala that Aelin was biding her time, and that the king was too focused on the assassin and the captain to consider sending anyone below. Adian reached for him, unrolling inch after inch of fuse, the line a white streak through the dark. Rowan's other nostril began bleeding. God, the smell of this place. The death and reek and misery of it. He could hardly think. It was like having his head in a vice. They retreated into the tunnel, that fuse their only hope and salvation. Something dripped on his shoulder. An ear bleed. He wiped it away with his free hand, but it was not blood on his cloak. What do you mean it's not blood on his cloak? What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? Rowan and Adian went rigid as a low growling filled the passage. Something on the ceiling moved. Then, 7 somethings? Adian dropped the spool and drew his sword. A piece of fabric, gray, small, worn, dropped from the maw of the creature clinging to the stone ceiling. His cloak. The missing corner of his cloak. Lurkin had lied. He hadn't killed the remaining wordhounds. He'd just given them Rowan's scent. Oh, you're shitting my dick right now. You are shitting my dick right now. You're shitting my dick right now. Oh. You're shitting my dick right now. Ah! Oh my god. No, but it's fine. They're gonna make it out of this alive. Somehow, they're making it out of this alive. Every single one of them. Every single one of them. They are. They will. Come on! They'll make it out alive. The odds are stacked against them, but they got this. They got this. They got this. Aelin, Ash River, Galathinius faced the king of Ardalan. Selena, Lillian, Aelin, she drawled. I don't particularly care what you call me. None of the guards behind them stirred. She could feel Kael's eyes on her, feel the relentless attention of the Valg prince inside Dorian. Did you think, the king said, grinning like a wolf, that I could not peer inside my son's mind and ask what he knows, what he saw the day of your cousin's rescue? She hadn't known, and she certainly hadn't planned on revealing herself this way. I'm surprised it took you this long to notice who you'd let in by the front door. Honestly, I'm a little disappointed. So your people might say of you, what was it like, princess, to climb into bed with my son, your mortal enemy? Dorian didn't so much as blink. Did you end it with him because of the guilt, or because you'd gained a foothold in my castle and no longer needed him? Is that fatherly concern I detect? A low laugh. Why doesn't the captain stop pretending that he's struck into those manacles and come a bit closer? Stuck! Sorry. Kael stiffened, but Aelin gave him a subtle nod. The king didn't bother glancing at his guards as he said, Get out. As one, the guards left, sealing the door behind them. The heavy glass groaned shut, the door shuddering. Kael's shackles clattered to the ground and he flexed his wrists. Such traitorous filth, dwelling in my own home. And to think I once had you in chains, once had you so close to execution, and had no idea what prize I instead sentenced to Endivir, the Queen of Terrasin, slave, and my champion. The king unfurled his fist to look at the 2 rings in his palm. He chucked them aside. They bounced on the red marble, pinging faintly. Too bad you don't have your flames now, Aelin Galathinius. Aelin tugged the cloth from the pommel of her father's blade and drew the sword of Orin. Where are the word keys? At least you're direct. But what shall you do to me, heir of Terrasin, if I do not tell you? He gestured to Dorian, and the prince descended the steps of the dais, stopping at the bottom. Time. She needed time. The tower wasn't down yet. Dorian, Kael said softly. The prince didn't respond. The king chuckled. No running today, Captain? Cale leveled his stare at the king and drew Damaris, Aelin's gift to him. The king tapped a finger on the arm of his throne. What would the noble people of Terrasen say if they knew Aelin of the Wildfire had such a bloody history? If they knew that she had signed her services over to me? What hope would it give them to know that even their long-lost princess was corrupted? You certainly like to hear yourself speak, don't you? The king's finger stilled on the throne. I'll admit that I don't know how I didn't see it. You're the same spoiled child who strutted about her castle. And here I was, thinking I'd helped you. I saw into your mind that day, Aelin Galathinius. You loved your home and your kingdom, but you had such a wish to be ordinary, such a wish for freedom from your crown, even then. Have you changed your mind? I offered you freedom on a platter 10 years ago, and yet you wound up a slave anyway. Funny. Time. Let him talk. You had the element of surprise then, Aelin said, but now we know what power you wield. Do you? Do you understand the cost of the keys? What you must become to use one? She tightened her grip on the sword of Orynth. Would you like to go head-to-head with me then, Aelin Galathinius, to see if the spells you learned, the books you stole from me, will hold out? Little tricks, princess, compared to the raw power of the keys. Dorian, Cale said again. The prince remained fixated on her, a hungry smile now on those sensuous lips. Let me demonstrate, the king said. Aelin braced herself, her gut clenching. He pointed at Dorian. Kneel. The prince dropped to his knees. She hid her wince at the impact of bone on marble. The king's brows knotted. A darkness began to build, cracking from the king like forks of lightning. No, Cale breathed, stepping forward. Aelin grabbed the captain by the arm before he could do something incredibly stupid. A tendril of the night slammed into Dorian's back, and he arched, groaning. I think there's more that you know, Aelin Galathinius, the king said, that too familiar blackness growing. Things that perhaps only the heir of Brannon Galathinius might have learned. The third word key. You wouldn't dare, Aelin said. The prince's neck was taut as he panted, as the darkness whipped him. Once. Twice. Lashings. She knew that pain. He's your son, your heir. You forget, princess, the king said, that I have 2 sons. Dorian screamed as another whip of darkness slashed his back. Black lightning flitted across his exposed teeth. She lunged, and was thrown back by the very wards she'd drawn on her body. An invisible wall of that black pain lay around Dorian now, and his screams became unending. Like a beast snapped from its leash, Cale flung himself against it, roaring Dorian's name. Became unending. Like a beast snapped from its leash, Cale flung himself against it, roaring Dorian's name, the blood crumbling from the cuff of his jacket with each attempt, again and again and again. Dorian was sobbing, darkness pouring out of his mouth, shackling his hands, branding his back, his neck. Then it vanished. The prince sagged to the floor, chest heaving. Cale halted mid-strike, his breathing ragged, face drawn. Rise, the king said. Dorian got to his feet, his black collar gleaming as his chest heaved. Delicious, the thing inside the prince said. Bile burned Aelin's throat. Please, Cale said hoarsely to the king, and her heart cracked at the word, at the agony and desperation. Free him. Name your price. I'll give you anything. Would you hand over your former lover, Captain? I see no use in losing a weapon if I don't gain one in return. The king waved a hand toward her. You destroyed my general and 3 of my princes. I can think of a few other Valg who are aching to get their claws into you for that, who would very much enjoy the chance to slip into your body. It's only fair. Aelin dared a glance toward the window. The sun climbed higher. You came into my family's home and murdered them in their sleep, Aelin said. The grandfather clock began chiming 12. A heartbeat later, the miserable, off-kilter clanging of the clock tower sounded. It's only fair, she said to the king as she backed a step towards the door, that I destroy you in return. She tugged the eye of Elena from under her suit. The blue stone glowed like a small star, not just a ward against evil, but a key in its own right that could be used to unlock Erwin's tomb. The king's eyes went wide, and he rose from his throne. You just made the mistake of your life, girl. He might have a point. The noontime bells were ringing, yet the clock tower still stood. 71. Rowan swung his sword, and the word-hound fell back, howling as his blade pierced through stone and into the tender flesh beneath, but not enough to keep it down, to kill it. Another word-hound leapt. Where they lunged, Rowan struck. Side by side, he and Adian had been pushed against a wall, conceding foot after foot of the passage, driven farther and farther from the spool of fuse Adian had been forced to drop. A clanging, miserable noise rang out. In the span between clangs, Rowan slashed for 2 different word-hounds, blows that would have disemboweled most creatures. The clock tower. Noon. The word-hounds were herding them back, dodging sure blows, keeping out of their reach, to keep them from getting to the fuse. Rowan swore and launched into an assault that engaged 3 of them at once, Adian flanking him. The word-hounds held their line. Noon. He had promised Aelin. As the sun began to reach its apex on the solstice, they'd bring the tower crashing down. The final clang of the clock tower sounded. Noon had come and gone, and his fire heart. His queen was in that castle above them, left with only her mortal training and wits to keep her alive. Perhaps not for much longer. The thought was so abhorrent, so outrageous that Rowan roared his fury, louder than the shrieks of the beasts. The bellow cost his brother. One creature shot past Rowan's guard, leaping, and Adian barked out a curse and staggered back. Rowan smelled Adian's blood before he saw it. It must have been a dinner bell to the word-hounds, that demi-fae blood. 4 of them leaped for the general as one. What? Their maws revealing flesh-shredding stone teeth. The 3 others whirled for Rowan, and there was nothing he could do to get to that fuse, to save the queen who held his heart in her scarred hands. But this is just for pretend, right? This isn't like... This is just to build suspense. Yeah? It's not like... Actually... Oh, that's so much better. It's not like... A few steps ahead of him, Chaol watched Aelin back toward the glass doors, just as they'd planned after seeing his men dead. The king's attention was fixed on the eye of Elena around her neck. She removed it, holding it in a steady hand. Been looking for this, have you? Poor Erwin, locked in his little tomb for so long. It was an effort to hold his position as Aelin kept retreating. Where did you find that? The king seethed. Aelin reached Chaol, brushing against him, a comfort and a thank you, and a goodbye as she continued past. Turns out your ancestor didn't approve of your hobbies. We Galathinius women stick together, you know. For the first time in his life, Chaol saw the king's face go slack. But then the man said, And did that ancient fool tell you what will happen if you wield the other key you already possess? She was so close to the doors. Let the prince go, or I'll destroy this, right here, and Erwin can stay locked up. She slid the chain into her pocket. Very well, the king said. He looked at Dorian, who showed no sign of even remembering his own name, despite what the witch had written on the walls of their city. Go, retrieve her. Darkness surged from Dorian, leaking like blood and water, and Chaol's head gave a burst of pain as Aelin ran, exploding through the glass doors, faster than he should be. Dorian raced after her, ice coating the floor, the room. The cold of it knocked the breath from him, but Dorian didn't glance once in his direction before he was gone. The king took a step down the dais, his breath clouding in front of him. Chaol lifted his sword, holding his position between the open doors and the conqueror of their continent. The king took another step. More heroic antics. Don't you ever get bored of them, Captain? Chaol did not yield. You murdered my men, and Sorstra, and a good many more. Another step. The king stared over Chaol's shoulder to the hallway where Aelin and Dorian had vanished. It ends now, Chaol said. My prophecy is coming to fruition. My prophecy is coming to fruition, and I don't like it! Oh, God. The Valg princes had been lethal in Wendlin, but when inhabiting Dorian's body, with Dorian's magic, Aelin hurtled down the hallway, glass windows flanking her, marble beneath, nothing but open sky around her. And behind, charging after her like a black storm, was Dorian. Ice spread from him, hoarfrost splintering along the windows. The moment that ice hit her, Aelin knew she would not run another step. She memorized every hallway and stairwell thanks to Chaol's maps. She pushed herself harder, praying that Chaol bought her time as she neared a narrow flight of stairs and hurled herself up, taking the steps by 2s and 3s. Ice cracked along the glass right behind her, and cold bit at her heels. Faster, faster. Around and up she flew. It was past noon. If something had gone wrong with Rowan and Adian, she hit the top of the stairs, and ice made the landing go slick as she skidded, going sideways, going down. She caught herself with a hand against the floor, her skin ripping open on the ice. She slammed into a glass wall and rebounded. Then she was running again as the ice closed in around her. Higher. She had to get higher. And Chaol, facing the king. She didn't let herself think about that. Spears of ice shot out from the walls, narrowly missing her sides. Her breath was aflame in her throat. "I told you," a cold male voice said from behind, not at all winded. Ice spiderwebbed across the windows on either side. "I told you that you would regret sparing me, that I would destroy everything you love." She reached a glass-covered bridge that stretched between 2 of the highest spires. The floor was utterly transparent, so clear that she could see every inch of the plunge to the ground far, far below. Hoarfrost coated the windows, groaning. Glass exploded, and a cry shattered from her throat as it sliced into her back. Aelin veered to the side for the now broken window, its 2 small iron frame and the drop below. She flung herself through it. Goddamn. Hi, Ryan. Chapter 72. Bright, open air, the wind roaring in her ears. Then Aelin landed on the open glass bridge a level below, her knees popping as she absorbed the impact and rolled. Her body shrieked in agony at the slices in her arms and back where bits of glass stuck clean through her suit. But she was already sprinting for the tower door at the other end of the bridge. She looked in time to see Dorian hurtle right through the space she'd cleared, his eyes fixed on her. Aelin flung open the door as the boom of Dorian hitting the bridge sounded. She slammed the door behind her, but even that couldn't seal out the growing cold. Just a little farther. Aelin raced up the spiraling tower stairs, half sobbing through her gritted teeth. Rowan, Adian, Chaol. Chaol. The door shattered off its hinges at the base of the spire, and cold exploded through, stealing her breath. But Aelin had reached the top of the tower. Beyond it, another glass footbridge, thin and bare, stretched far across to one of the other spires. It was still shaded as the sun crept across the other side of the building, the uppermost turrets of the glass castle surrounding and smothering her like a cage of darkness. Aelin had gotten out and taken Dorian with her. Chaol had bought her that time, in one final attempt to save his friend and his king. When she had burst into his house this morning, sobbing and laughing, she had explained that the wing leader had written the payment the witch had given in exchange for saving her life. What the wing leader had written, sorry. Dorian was still in there, still fighting. She had planned to take them both on at once, the king and the prince, and he had agreed to help her, to try to talk Dorian back into humanity, to try to convince the prince to fight. Until that moment, he'd seen his men hanging from the gates. Now he had no interest in talking. If Aelin were to stand a chance, any chance, of freeing Dorian from that collar, she needed the king out of the picture, even if it cost her the vengeance for her family and kingdom. Chaol was glad to settle that score on her behalf, and on the behalf of many more. The king looked at Chaol's sword, then at his face, and laughed. "You'll kill me, Captain." Such dramatics. They'd gotten away. Aelin had gotten Dorian out. Her bluff so flawless, even Chaol had believed that eye in her hands was the real thing. But the way she'd angled it into the sun, so blue the stone glowed. He had no idea where she'd put the real one, if she was even wearing it. All of it. All that they had done, and lost, and fought for. All of it, for this moment. The king kept approaching, and Chaol held his sword before him, not yielding for one step. For Ress, for Brullo, for Sorsja, for Dorian, for Aelin and Adian and their family, for the thousands massacred in those labor camps, and for Nesrin, who he'd lied to, who would wait for a return that wouldn't come, for a time they wouldn't have together. He had no regrets but that one. This is not real, right? This is... A wave of black slammed into him, and Cale staggered back a step, the marks of protection tingling on his skin. You lost, Cale panted. The blood was flaking away beneath his clothes, itching. Another wave of black, identical to the one that had struck Dorian, which Dorian hadn't been able to stand against. Cale felt it that time, the throb of unending agony, the whisper of pain to come. The king approached. Cale lifted his sword higher. Your words are failing, boy. Cale smiled, tasting blood in his mouth. Good thing steel lasts longer. The sun, through the windows, warmed Cale's back, as if in an embrace, as if in comfort, as if to tell him it was time. I'll make it count, Aelin had promised. He had bought her time. A wave of black reared up behind the king, sucking the light out of the room. Cale speared his arms wide as the darkness hit him, shattered him, obliterated him, until there was nothing but light, burning blue light, warm and welcoming. Aelin and Dorian had gotten away. It was enough. When the pain came, he was not afraid. But he's not. Like, it's... But he's not. But he's not. Are you being for real right now? Are y'all being for real right now? Y'all are not being for real right now. He was not afraid. Are you shitting my dick right now? He was not afraid? He's not! Chapter 73. It was going to kill her. He wanted it to. Her face. That face. I'm mad. He neared the woman. I don't believe it, obviously. Step by step, across the narrow, shaded bridge, the turrets high above them gleaming with blinding light. Blood covered her arms, and she panted as she backed away from him, her hands out before her, a gold ring shining on her finger. He could smell her now, the immortal, mighty blood in her veins. Dorian, she said. He did not know that name, and he was going to kill her. Chapter 74. Time. She needed to buy more time, or steal it, while the bridge still lay in shadow, while the sun slowly, slowly moved. Dorian, Aelin pleaded again. I'm going to rip you apart from the inside out, the demon said. Eyes spread across the bridge. The glass in her back shifted and ripped into her with each step she retreated toward the tower door. Still, the clock tower had not come down, but the king had not yet arrived. Your father is currently in his council room, she said, fighting the pain splintering through her. He's in there with Cale, with your friend, and your father has likely already killed him. Good. Cale, Aelin said, her voice breaking. Her foot slid against a patch of ice, and the world tilted as she steadied her balance. The drop to the ground hundreds of feet below hit her in the gut, but she kept her eyes on the prince even as agony rippled down her body. Cale, you sacrificed yourself. You let them put that collar on you so he could get out. I'm going to let him put a collar on you, and then we can play. She hit the tower door, fumbling for the latch, but it was iced over. She clawed at the ice, glancing between the prince and the sun that had begun to peek around the corner of the tower. Dorian was 10 steps away. She whirled back, around. Sorstja. Her name was Sorstja, and she loved you. You loved her, and they took her from you. 5 steps. There was nothing human in that face, no flicker of memory in those sapphire eyes. Aelin began weeping, even as blood leaked down from her nose. From his nearness. I came back for you, just like I promised. A dagger of ice appeared in his hand, its lethal tip glinting like a star in the sunlight. I don't care, Dorian said. She shoved a hand between them as if she could push him away, grabbing one of his own hands tight. Her skin was so cold as he used the other to plunge the knife into her side. What the fuck is going on right now? What the fuck is going on right now? Why did she just get stabbed? Why? Why? Why are we losing? How did we get here? here. I need alcohol in this. I don't need water. I need straight alcohol. Rowan's blood sprayed from his mouth as the creature slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. 4 were dead, but 3 remained between him and the fuse. Adian bellowed in pain and fury, holding the line, keeping the other 3 at bay as Rowan drove his blade home. The creature flipped back, away, out of reach. The 3 beasts converged again, wild with the fey blood now covering the passage. His blood, Adian's. The general's face was already pale from the loss of it. They couldn't stand this much longer, but he had to get that tower down. As though they were of one mind, one body, the 3 word-hounds lunged, driving him and Adian apart, one leaping for the general, 2 snapping for him. Rowan went down, of course, as stone jaws clamped onto his leg. Of fucking course. Bone snapped. Why not? And Black crushed in. Why the fuck not? I mean, why not? He roared against the darkness that meant death. Rowan slammed his fighting knife into the creature's eye, driving up and deep, just as the second beast lunged for his outstretched arm. But something massive slammed into the creature, and it yelped as it was thrown against the wall. The dead one was hurled away a heartbeat later, and then there was Lorcan. Why the fuck would he come if he lied to them? What? Swords out and swinging, a battle cry on his lips as he tore into the remaining creatures. Rowan bellowed against the agony in his lower leg as he got to his feet, balancing his weight. Adian was already up, his face a bloody mess, but his eyes clear. One of the creatures lunged for Adian, and Rowan hurled his fighting knife. Hurled it hard and true, right into its gaping mouth. The wordhound hit the ground not 6 inches from the general's feet. Lorcan was a whirlwind of steel, his fury unmatched. Rowan drew his other knife, readying to throw it, just as Lorcan drove his sword clean down into the creature's skull. Silence. Utter silence in the bloodied tunnel. Adian scrambled, limping and swaying, for the fuse 20 paces away. It was still attached to the spool. Now, Rowan barked. He didn't care if they didn't make it out. For all he knew, a phantom pain lanced through his ribs, brutally violent and nauseating. His knees buckled. Not pain from a wound of his, but another's. No. He might have been screaming it, might have been roaring it, as he surged for the passage exit, as he felt that agony, that lick of cold. Things had gone very, very wrong. He made it another step before his leg gave out, and it was only that invisible bond, straining and fraying, that kept him conscious. A hard, blood-soaked body slammed into his, an arm wrapping around his waist, hauling him up. "Run, you stupid fool," Lorcan hissed, hauling him from the fuse. Adian was crouched over it, his bloody hand steady as he grasped the flint and struck. Once, twice, then a spark, and a flame that went roaring off into the darkness. They ran like hell. "Faster," Lorcan said, and Adian caught up to them, taking Rowan's other arm and adding his strength and speed. Down the passage, past the broken iron gates, into the sewers. There was not enough time and space between them and the tower. And Aelin, the bond stretched tighter, splintering. No, Aelin. They heard it before they felt it. The utter lack of sound, like the world had paused, followed by a cracking boom. "Move," Lorcan said, a barked order that had Rowan blindly obeying just as he had for centuries. Then the wind, the dry, burning wind that flayed his skin. Then a flash of blinding light. Then heat, such heat that Lorcan swore, shoving them into an alcove. The tunnel shook. The world shook. The ceilings came crashing down. When the dust and debris cleared, when Rowan's body was singing with pain and joy and power, the way into the castle was blocked. And behind them, stretching into the gloom of the sewers, were 100 Val commanders and foot soldiers, armed and smiling. Oh my god. Reeking to Hela's realm with Val blood, Manon and Asterin were soaring down the continent, back to Morath when a soft wind, a shudder in the world, a silence. Asterin barked a cry, her wyvern banking right as if the reins had been yanked. Abraxas loosed a yelp of his own, but Manon just peered down at the land, where birds were taking flight at the shimmer that seemed to rush past, at the magic that now rippled through the world. Free. Darkness embraced her. Magic. Whatever had happened, however it had been freed, Manon didn't care. That mortal, human weight vanished. Strength coursed through her, coating her bones like armor. Invincible, immortal, unstoppable. Manon tipped her head back to the sky, spread her arms wide, and roared. The keep was in chaos. Witches and humans were running around shouting, magic. Magic was free. Not possible. But she could feel it, even with the collar around her neck and that scar on her arm. The loosing of some great beast inside her. A beast who purred at the shadow fire. Aelin crawled away from the door, stained with her blood, away from the Valg prince who laughed as she clutched at her side and inched closer to the bridge, her blood a smear behind her. The sun was still creeping around that tower. Dorian, she said, her legs pushing against the glass. I'm literally shaking. I'm shaking. Her blood dribbling out from between her freezing fingers, warming them. Remember. The Valg prince stalked her, smiling faintly as she collapsed onto her front in the center of the bridge. The shadowed spires of the glass castle loomed around her. A tomb. Her tomb. Dorian, remember, she gasped out. He'd missed her heart, barely. He said to retrieve you, but perhaps I'll have my fun first. 2 knives appeared in his hands, curved and vicious. The sun began glinting just above the tower overhead. Remember Chaol, she begged. Remember Sorsja. Remember me. A boom shook the castle from somewhere on the other side of the building, and then a great wind, a soft wind, a lovely wind, as if the heart song of the world were carried on it. She got up, she closed her eyes for a moment and pressed her hand against her side, drawing in a breath. We get to come back, Aelin said, pushing her hand harder and harder into her wound until the blood stopped, until it was only her tears that flowed. Dorian, we get to come back from this loss, from this darkness. We get to come back, and I came back for you. She was weeping now, weeping as that wind faded away and her wound knitted closed. The prince's daggers had gone slack in his hands, and on his finger, a thrill's golden ring glowed. I knew it. I knew she was going to put that shit on him. Ah! Fight it, she panted. The sun angled closer. Fight it. We get to come back. Brighter and brighter, the golden ring pulsed at his finger. The prince staggered back a step, his face twisting. You human worm. He had been too busy stabbing her to notice the ring she'd slipped onto his finger when she'd grabbed his hand as if to shove him away. Take it off, he growled, trying to touch it, and hissing as though it burned. Take it off. Ice grew, spreading toward her, fast as the rays of sunlight that now shot between the towers, refracting across every glass parapet and bridge, filling the castle with Mallow Firebringer's glorious light. The bridge. This bridge that she and Chaol had selected for this purpose, for this one moment at the apex of the solstice, was smack in the middle of it. The light hit her, and it filled her heart with the force of an exploding star. With a roar, the Valg prince sent a wave of ice for her, spears and lances aimed at her chest. So Aelin flung her hands out toward the prince, toward her friend, and hurled her magic at him with everything she had. Oh, God. Oh, my God. Chapter 75. There was fire, and light, and darkness and ice, but the woman was there, halfway across the bridge, her hands out before her as she got to her feet. No blood leaked from where the ice had stabbed her. Only clean, polished skin peeked through the black material of her suit. Healed, with magic. All around him there was so much fire and light tugging at him. We get to come back, she said, as if she knew what this darkness was, what horrors existed. Fight it. A light was burning at his finger, a light that cracked inside him, a light that cracked a sliver into the darkness. Remember, she said. Her flames tore at him, and the demon was screaming, but it did not hurt him. Her flames only kept the demon at bay. Remember. A sliver of light in the blackness. A cracked doorway. Remember. Over the demon's screaming, he pushed, and looked out through its eyes. His eyes, and saw Selena Sardathian standing before him. My baby's back. My husband has returned from war. He's returned. He's come back to me. My husband came back, y'all. Adian spat blood onto the debris. Rowan was barely remaining conscious as he leaned against the cave in behind them, while Lorcan tried to cut a path through the onslaught of Valg fighters. More and more poured in from the tunnels, armed and bloodthirsty, alerted by the blast. Drained and unable to summon the full depths of their magic so soon, even Rowan and Lorcan wouldn't be able to keep the Valg occupied for long. Adian had 2 knives left. He knew they weren't getting out of these tunnels alive. The soldiers came in like an unending wave, their hollow eyes lit with bloodlust. Even down here, Adian could hear the people screaming in the streets, either from the explosion or their magic returning to flood their land. That wind, he'd never smelled anything like it. Never would again. They'd taken out the tower. They'd done it. Now his queen would have her magic. Maybe now she'd stand a chance. Adian gutted the Valg commander nearest him, black blood splattering on his hands, and engaged the 2 that stepped in to replace him. Behind him, Rowan's breaths were rasping, too labored. The prince's magic, draining with his blood loss, had begun faltering moments ago, no longer able to choke the air out of the soldiers' lungs. Now it was no more than a cold wind shoving against them, keeping the bulk at bay. Adian hadn't recognized Lorcan's magic, as it had blasted from him in near-invisible dark winds, but where it struck, soldiers went down and did not rise. It too had now failed him. Adian could scarcely lift his sword arm, just a little longer. Just a few more minutes of keeping these soldiers engaged so that his queen could remain distraction-free. With a grunt of pain, Lorcan was engulfed by 6 soldiers and shoved out of sight into the blackness. Adian kept swinging and swinging until there were no Valg before him, until he realized that the soldiers had pulled back 20 feet and regrouped. A solid line of Valg foot soldiers, their numbers stretching away into the gloom, stood watching him, holding their swords, waiting for the order to strike. Too many to escape. It's been an honor, Prince, Adian said to Rowan. Rowan's only reply was a rasping breath. The Valg commander stalked to the front of the line, his own sword out. Somewhere back in the sewer, soldiers began screaming. Lorcan, that selfish prick, must have cut a path through them after all, and run. Charge on my mark, the commander said, his black ring glinting as he lifted a hand. Adian stepped in front of Rowan, useless as it would be. They'd kill Rowan once he was dead anyway, but at least he'd go down fighting, defending his brother. At least he would have that. People were still screaming on the street above, shrieking with blind terror, the sounds of their panic growing closer, louder. Steady, the commander said to the swordsman. Adian took a breath. One of his last, he realized. Rowan straightened as best he could, stalwart against the death that now beckoned, and Adian could have sworn the prince whispered Aylin's name. More shouting from the soldiers in the back, some in the front turning to see what the panic was about. I know who it is! I know who it is! I was like, who the fuck is coming? Who the fuck is here? Who the fuck is coming to the rescue? I know exactly who it is. I know exactly who it is. It's the it's his fucking daddy. It's Adian's daddy! It's his father! It's his father, isn't it? Or is it Adian's men? It could either be Adian's men or it's Adian's father. One of those two. Some in the front turning to see what the panic was about behind them. Adian didn't care, not with a row of swords before them, gleaming like the teeth of some mighty beast. The commander's hand came down and was ripped clean off by a ghost leopard. Ah! Ah! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my fucking god! Lysandra! Oh my god! Oh my fucking god! I did not expect it! I did not! Oh my god! Oh my god! Here we go. Here we go. I was wrong, but I'm happy that I was wrong. I'm happy that I was wrong. I truly am. For Evangeline, for her freedom, for her future. Where Lysandra lunged, slashing with claws and fangs, soldiers died. She'd made it halfway across the city before she got out of that carriage. She told Evangeline to take it all the way to the Felix country house, to be a good girl and stay safe. Lysandra had sprinted 2 blocks toward the castle, not caring if she had little to offer them in their fight, when the wind slammed into her and a wild song sparkled in her blood. Then she shed her human skin, that mortal cage, and ran, tracking the scents of her friends. The soldiers in the sewer were screaming as she tore into them, a death for every day in hell, a death for the childhood taken from her and from Evangeline. She was fury, she was wrath, she was vengeance. Adian and Rowan were backed up against the cave-in, their faces bloody and gaping as she leapt upon the back of a sentry and shredded his spine clean out of his skin. Oh, she liked this body. More soldiers rushed into the sewers, and Lysandra whirled toward them, giving herself wholly to the beast whose form she wore. She became death incarnate. I love her. I love her. Stop. I love her so much. She became, when there were none left, when blood soaked her pale fur, blood that tasted vile, she paused at last. The palace, Rowan gasped from where he'd slumped against the stones, Adian pressing a hand to a wound in the Fey warrior's leg. Rowan pointed to the open sewer behind them, littered with gore. To the queen. An order and a plea. Lysandra nodded her furry head, the disgusting blood leaking from her maw, black gore in her fangs, and bolted back the way she'd come. People screamed at the ghost leopard that shot down the street, sleek as an arrow, dodging, whinnying horses and carriages. The glass castle loomed, half-shrouded by the smoking ruins of the clock tower, and light, fire, exploded between its turrets. Aelin was still alive, and fighting like hell. The iron gates of the castle appeared ahead, strung with reeking corpses. Fire and darkness slammed into each other atop the castle, and people fell silent as they pointed. Lysandra raced for the gates, and the crowd spied her at last. Scrambling and bleeding to get out of her way, they cleared a path right to the open entrance, revealing 30 Val guards armed with crossbows lined up in front of it, ready to fire. Lysandra 30 guards with bolts, sorry. They all trained their weapons on her. 30 guards with bolts, and beyond them an open path to the castle, to Aelin. Lysandra leaped. The closest guard fired a clean, spiraling shot right for her chest. She knew, with that leopard's senses, that it would hit home. Yet Lysandra did not slow. She did not stop. For Evangeline, for her future, for her freedom. She literally can turn into a fly. What is she doing? She can literally turn into a fly. What is she doing? She can literally turn into a fly. What is she doing? What? For her freedom, for the friends who had come for her. The bolt neared her heart and was knocked from the air by an arrow. Okay, I'm glad that she was saved, but she can literally turn into a fly. She hasn't shifted in 10 years. It's hard. She shifted immediately after she got her powers back. I don't want to hear. She could have shifted into a fly. Lysandra landed on the guard's face and shredded it with her claws. There was only one sharp shooter with that sort of aim. We all know who that is, Nesrin. Lysandra loosed a roar and became a storm of death upon the guards nearest her, while arrows rained on the rest. When Lysandra dared a look, it was in time to see Nesrin Philique draw another arrow atop the neighboring rooftop. There's my bitch, flanked by her rebels, and fire it clean through the eye of the final guard between Lysandra and the castle. Go, Nesrin shouted. Flame and night warred in the highest spires, and the earth shuddered. Lysandra was already running up the sloped, curving path between the trees. Nothing but the grass and the trees and the wind. Nothing but the sleek, powerful body, her shapeshifter's heart burning, glowing, singing with each step, each curve she took, fluid and swift and free. Faster and faster, every movement of that leopard's body a joy, even as her queen battled for her kingdom and the world high, high above. Chapter 76. Aelin panted, fighting against the throbbing in her head. Too soon. Too much power too soon. She hadn't had time to draw it up the safe way, spiraling slowly to its depths. Shifting into her Fae form hadn't helped. It had only made the Valg smell worse. Dorian was on his knees, clawing at his hand where the ring kept glowing, branding his flesh. His sent darkness snapping for her again and again, and each time she slammed it away with the wall of flame. But her blood was heating. "Try, Dorian," she begged, her tongue like paper in her parched mouth. "I will kill you, you fey bitch." A low laugh sounded behind her. Aelin half turned, not daring to put her back to either of them, even if it meant exposing herself to the open fall. Oh, God. The king of Ardalan stood in the open doorway. At the other end of the bridge, Gale. There's no way he's dead. Y'all, there's no way. There's no way. Such a noble effort from the captain to try to buy you time so you might save my son. She tried, but punish her, the demon hissed from the other end of the bridge. Patience, but the king stiffened as he took in the gold ring burning on Dorian's hand. That harsh, brutal face tightened. "What have you done?" Dorian thrashed, shuddering, and let out a scream that sent her fey ears ringing. Aelin drew her father's sword. "You killed Gale," she said, the words hollow. The boy didn't even land a single blow. He's not, y'all. He's not. You're joking me. You're joking me, right? Bro. I doubt you will either. Dorian went silent. Aelin snarled. "You killed him." The king approached, his footfalls thudding on the glass bridge. "My one regret," the king said to her, "is that I did not get to take my time." Bro, you're joking. Bro, you're joking. You're joking. I don't believe it. She backed up a step. Just one. The king drew Nathung. "I'll take my time with you, though." Aelin lifted her sword in both hands. Then, "What did you say?" Oh my god. Oh my god, y'all. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh god. Oh god. Oh god. Oh god. Oh my god. Not the platonic soulmates. I don't know whether to be happy or cry. I really don't. I don't know whether to be happy or if I should be just devastated right now. Oh my god. Dorian. The voice was hoarse, broken. The king and Aelin both turned toward the prince, but Dorian's eyes were on his father, and they were burning like stars. "What did you say?" "About Gale," the king snapped. "Silence." "Did you kill him?" Not a question. Aelin's lips began trembling, but she tunneled down inside herself. "And if I did?" the king said, brows high. "Did you kill Gale?" The light at Dorian's hand burned and burned, but the collar remained around his neck. "You," the king snapped, and Aelin realized he meant her, just as a spear of darkness shot for her. So fast, too fast. The darkness shattered against a wall of ice. Dorian. His name was Dorian! Oh my god! Dorian Havillard, and he was the crown prince of Ardalan and Selena Sardothian, Aelin Galathinius, his friend. She had come back for him. She faced him, an ancient sword in her hands. "Dorian?" she breathed. The demon inside him was screaming and pleading, ripping at him, trying to bargain. A wave of black slammed into the shield of ice he'd thrown up between the princess and his father. Soon the king would break through it. Dorian lifted his hands to the wordstone collar. Smooth, cold smooth, thrumming. "Don't!" the demon shrieked. "Don't!" There were tears running down Aelin's face as Dorian gripped the black stone encircling his throat. And, bellowing his grief, his rage, his pain, he snapped the collar from his neck. Oh my God. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. You see me? I'm crying tears of joy because my husband is back, y'all. My husband is back. He's back. Chapter 77. The Wardstone collar broke in two, severing along a hairline fracture where the ring's power had sliced through. Dorian was panting, and blood was running from his nose, but Aelin, he gasped out, and the voice was his. It was him. She ran, sheathing the sword of Orinth, reaching his side as the wall of ice exploded beneath a hammer of darkness. The king's power surged for them, and Aelin flung out a single hand. A shield of fire blasted into existence, and the darkness was shoved back. "Neither of you are leaving here alive," the king said, his rough voice slithering through the fire. Dorian sagged against her, and Aelin slipped a hand around his waist to hold him up. Pain flickered in her gut, and a throbbing began in her blood. She couldn't hold out. Not so unprepared. Even as the sun held at its peak, as if Mala herself willed it to linger just a little longer, to amplify the gifts she'd already showered on a princess of Terrasen. "Dorian," Aelin said, pain lancing down her spine as burnout neared. He turned his head, an eye still on the wall of flickering flames. Such pain and grief and rage in those eyes, yet somehow beneath it all, a spark of spirit, of hope. Aelin extended her hand, a question and an order, and an offer and a promise. "To a better future," she said. "You came back," he said, as if that were an answer. They joined hands. So the world ended, and the next one began. They were infinite. They were the beginning and the ending. They were eternity. The king standing before them gaped as the shield of flame died out to reveal Aelin and Dorian, hand in hand, glowing like newborn gods as their magic entwined. "You are mine," the king raged. He became darkness, folded himself into the power he carried, as if he were nothing but malice on a dark wind. He struck them, swallowed them, but they held tighter to each other, past and present and future, flickering between an ancient hall and a mountain castle perched above Orinth, a bridge suspended between glass towers, and another place, perfect and strange, where they had been crafted from stardust and light. A wall of night knocked them back, but they could not be contained. The darkness paused for a breath. They erupted. Rowan blinked against the sunlight as it poured from beyond Adian. Soldiers had infiltrated the sewers again, even as after Lysandra had saved their sorry asses. Lorcan had rushed back, bloodied, and told them the way out was barred, and whatever way Lysandra had gotten in was now overrun. With battlefield efficiency, Rowan had healed his leg as best he could with his remaining power. While he'd patched himself up, bone and skin knitting together hastily enough to make him bark in pain, Adian and Lorcan clawed a path through the cave-in, just as the sewer had filled with the sounds of the soldiers rushing in. They'd hauled ass back to the castle grounds, where they hit another cave-in. Adian had started ripping at the top of it, shouting and roaring at the earth, as if his will alone could move it. But now there was a hole. It was all Rowan needed. Rowan shifted, his leg flashing in agony as he exchanged his limbs for wings and talons. He loosed a cry, shrill and raging. A white-tailed hawk soared out from the small opening past Adian. Rowan did not linger as he took in his surroundings. They were somewhere in the castle gardens, the glass castle looming beyond. The reek of the smoke from the ruin of the clock tower clogged his senses. Light exploded from the uppermost castle spires, so bright that he was blinded for a moment. Aelin, alive. Alive. He flapped, bending to the wind to his will with the dregs of his magic, soaring faster and faster. He sent another wind toward the clock tower, rerouting the smoke toward the river, away from them. Rowan rounded the corner of the castle. He had no words for what he saw. The king of Ardalan bellowed as Aelin and Dorian fractured his power. Together they broke down every spell, every ounce of evil that he'd bent and shackled to his command. Infinite. Dorian's power was infinite. They were full of light, of fire and starlight and sunshine. They overflowed with it as they snapped the final tether on the king's power and cleaved his darkness away, burning it up until it was nothing. The king fell to his knees, the glass bridge thudding with this impact. Aelin released Dorian's hand. Cold emptiness flooded her so violently that she too fell to the glass floor, gulping down air, reeling herself back in, remembering who she was. Dorian was staring at his father, the man who had broken him, enslaved him. In a voice she had never heard, the king whispered, "My boy." Dorian didn't react. The king gazed up at his son, his eyes wide, bright, and said again, "My boy." Then the king looked to where she was on her knees, gaping at him. "Have you come to save me at last, Aelin Galathinius?" Huh? Huh? What? What? 78. Aelin Galathinius stared at the butcher of her family, her people, her continent. "Don't listen to his lies," Dorian said, flat and hollow. Aelin studied the king's hand, where the dark ring had been shattered, away. Only a pale band of skin remained. "Who are you?" she said quietly. "Human." More and more the king looked human, softer. The king turned to Dorian, exposing his broad palms. "Everything I did, it was all to keep you safe. From him." Aelin went still. "I found the key," the king went on, the words tumbling out. "I found the key and brought it to Morath, and he... Parrington." Huh? "We were young, and he took me under the keep to show me the crypt, even though it was forbidden, but I opened it with the key." Tears, real and clear, flowed down his ruddy face. "I opened it, and he came. He took Parrington's body, and..." He gazed at his bare hand, watched it shake. "He let his minion take me." "That's enough," Dorian said. Aelin's heart stumbled. "Erwin is free," she breathed. "And not only free. Erwin was Parrington. The Dark King himself had manhandled her, lived in this castle with her, and had never known, by luck or fate or Elena's own protection, that she was here. She had never known either, never detected it on him. Oh, good gravy. Oh, good Lord. We are screwed. We are screwed. I have no words. And I was wondering, I was like, this sounds like it's going to be the end of the king. I wonder if the rest of the books are just going to forget about Erwin and we're going to focus on Maeve being like the enemy. I really thought, y'all. I really fucking thought. I really fucking thought. Sorry, my phone was dying. Oh my god. Gods above, Erwin had forced her to bow that day in Endivere, and neither of them had scented or marked what the other was. The king nodded, setting his tears splattering on his tunic. The eye. You could have sealed him back in with the eye. The look on the king's face when she had revealed the necklace. He'd been seeing a tool not of destruction, but of salvation. Aelin said, "How is it possible he's been inside Parrington all this time and no one noticed? He can hide inside a body like a snail in its shell, but cloaking his presence also stifles his own abilities to scent others, like you. And now you're back. All the players in the unfinished game, the Galathinius line, and the Havillard line, which he has hated so fiercely all this time, why he targeted my family, and yours. You butchered my kingdom," she managed to say. That night her parents died. There had been that smell in the room, the scent of the Valg. You slaughtered millions. I tried to stop it. The king braced a hand on the bridge, as if to keep from collapsing under the weight of the shame now coating his words. They could defined you based on your magic alone and wanted the strongest of you for themselves. And when you were born, his scraggy features crumpled as he again addressed Dorian. You were so strong, so precious. I couldn't let them take you. I wrested control away for just long enough. To do what? Dorian said hoarsely. Aelin glanced at the smoke wafting toward the river far beyond. To order the towers built, she said. To use that spell to banish magic. And now that they had freed magic, the magic wielders would be sniffed out by every Valg demon in Aurelia. The king gasped a shuddering breath, but he didn't know how I'd done it. He thought the magic vanished as punishment from our gods and knew nothing of why the towers were built. All this time I used my strength to keep the knowledge of it away from him, from them. All my strength, so I could not fight the demon, stop it when it did those things. I kept that knowledge safe. He's a liar, Dorian said, turning on his heel. There was no mercy in his voice. I still wound up able to use my magic. It didn't protect me at all. He'll say anything. The wicked will tell us anything to haunt our thoughts long after, Nehemiah had warned her. I didn't know, the king pleaded. Using my blood in the spell must have made my line immune. It was a mistake. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, my boy. Dorian. You don't get to call him that, Aelin snapped. You came to my home and murdered my family. I came to find you. I came to have you burn it out of me, the king sobbed. Aelin of the Wildfire. I tried to get you to do it, but your mother knocked you unconscious before you could kill me. And the demon became devoted to wiping out your line after that. So no fire could ever cleanse him from me. Shit, damn. Oh, there's no blocking the sun now. Aelin's blood turned to ice. No, it couldn't be true. Couldn't be right. All of it was to find you, the king said, so you could save me, so you could end me at last. Please, do it. The king was weeping now, and his body seemed to waste away bit by bit, his cheeks hollowing out, his hands thinning, as if his life force and the demon prince inside him had indeed been bonded, and one could not exist without the other. Cale is alive. You smug-ass bitches. I told y'all he wasn't dead. I told y'all he was not dead. I didn't believe it for a second. Oh my god, there's... Y'all, I feel very awkward. There's someone literally crying over there on the other side of me. They're gone. Oh god. The king murmured through his emaciated hands, lowering them to reveal red-rimmed eyes, already milky with age. Broken, but I didn't make the kill. There was a light around him. I left him alive. A sob ripped from her throat. She had hoped, had tried to give him a shot at survival. You're a liar, Dorian said again, his voice cold, so cold. And you deserve this. Light sparked at Dorian's fingertips. Aelin mouthed his name, trying to reel herself back in, gather her wits. The demon inside the king had hunted her not because of the threat Terrasen posed, but for the fire in her veins. The fire that could end them both. She shifted a hand as Dorian stepped toward his father. They had to ask more, learn more. The crown prince tipped his head back to the sky and roared, and it was the battle cry of a god. Then the glass castle shattered. Damn. 79. The bridge exploded from beneath her, and the world turned into shards of flying glass. Aelin plummeted into open air, towers crashing down around her. She flung out her magic in a cocoon, burning through the glass as she fell and fell. People were screaming as Dorian brought the castle down for Cale, for Sorstia, and sent a tidal wave of glass rushing toward the city lying below. Down and down Aelin went, the ground surging up, the buildings around her rupturing, the light so bright on all the fragments. Aelin pulled out every last drop of her magic as the castle collapsed, a lethal wave of glass cascading toward Rifthold. Wildfire raced for the gates, raced against the wind, against death, and the wave of glass crested the iron gates, shredding through the corpses tied there as if they were paper. A wall of fire erupted before it, shooting sky high, spreading wide, halting it. A wind shoved against her, brutal and unforgiving, her bones groaning as it pushed her up, not down. She didn't care, not when she yielded the entirety of her magic, the entirety of her being to holding the barrier of flame now shielding Rifthold. A few more seconds, then she could die. The wind tore at her, and it sounded like it was roaring her name. Wave after wave of glass and debris slammed into her wildfire, but she kept that wall of flame burning, for the royal theater, and the flower girls at the market, for the slaves and the courtesans and the Philique family, for the city that had offered her joy and pain, death and rebirth, for the city that had given her music. Aelin kept that wall of fire burning bright. There was blood raining down among the glass, blood that sizzled on her little cocoon of flame, reeking of darkness and pain. The wind kept blowing until it swept that dark blood away. Still, Aelin held the shield around the city, held on to the final promise she'd made to Chaol. I'll make it count. She held on until the ground rose up to meet her, and she landed softly in the grass. Then darkness slammed into the back of her head. I love her. God damn it, I fucking love her. The world was so bright. Aelin Galatinius groaned as she pushed herself onto her elbows, the small hill of grass beneath her untouched and vibrant. Only a moment. She'd been out for only a moment. She raised her head, her skull throbbing as she shoved her unbound hair from her eyes and looked at what she had done, what Dorian had done. The glass castle was gone. Only the stone castle remained, its gray stones warming under the midday sun. And where a cascade of glass and debris should have destroyed a city, a massive, opaque wall glittered. A wall of glass, its upper lip curved as if it indeed had been a cresting wave. The glass castle was gone. The king was dead, and Dorian. Aelin scrambled up, her arms buckling under her. There, not 3 feet away, was Dorian, sprawled on the grass, eyes closed, but his chest was rising and falling. Beside him, as if some benevolent god had indeed been looking after them, lay Chaol. His face was bloody, but he breathed. No other wounds that she could detect. She began shaking. She wondered if he had noticed when she'd slipped the real eye of Elena into his pocket as she'd fled the throne room. The scent of pine and snow hit her, and she realized how they had survived the fall. Aelin got to her feet, swaying. The sloping hill down the city had been demolished, its trees and lampposts and greenery shredded by the glass. She didn't want to know about the people who had been on the grounds or in the castle. She forced herself to walk toward the wall, toward the panicked city beyond, toward the new world that beckoned. 2 scents converged, then a third, a strange, wild scent that belonged to everything and nothing. But Aelin did not look at Adian, or Rowan, or Lysandra as she descended the hill to the city. Every step was an effort, every breath a trial to pull herself back from the brink, to hold on to the here and now and what had to be done. Aelin approached the towering glass wall that now separated the castle from the city, that separated death from life. She punched a battering ram of blue flame through it. More yelling arose as the flame gate ate away at the glass, forming an archway. The people beyond, crying and holding one another, or gripping their heads, or covering their mouths, went quiet as she strode through the door she'd made. The gallows still stood just beyond the wall. It was the only raised surface that she could see. Better than nothing. Aelin ascended the butchering block, her court falling into rank behind her. Rowan was limping, but she didn't allow herself to examine him, to even ask if he was all right. Not yet. Aelin kept her shoulders back, her face grave and unyielding as she stopped at the edge of the platform. "Your king is dead," she said. The crowd stirred. "Your prince lives." "All hail Dorian Havillard," someone shouted down the street. No one else echoed it. Oh, that's embarrassing. "My name is Aelin Ash River Galatinius," she said, "and I am the Queen of Terrasen." The crowd murmured. Some onlookers stepped away from the platform. "Your prince is in mourning. Until he is ready, this city is mine." Absolute silence. "If you loot If you riot, if you cause one lick of trouble, she said, looking a few in the eyes, I will find you, and I will burn you to ash. She lifted a hand, and flames danced at her fingertips. If you revolt against your new king, if you try to take his castle, then his wall, she gestured with her burning hand, will turn to molten glass and flood your streets, your homes, your throats. Aelin lifted her chin, her mouth cutting a hard, unforgiving line as she surveyed the crowd filling the streets, people craning to see her, see the fey ears and elongated canines, see the flames flicking around her fingers. I killed your king. His empire is over. Your slaves are now free people. If I catch you holding on to your slaves, if I hear of any household keeping them captive, you are dead. If I hear of you whipping a slave or trying to sell one, you are dead. So I suggest that you tell your friends and families and neighbors. I suggest that you act like reasonable, intelligent people, and I suggest that you stay on your best behavior until your king is ready to greet you, at which time I swear on my crown that I will yield control of this city to him. If anyone has a problem with it, you can take it up with my court. She motioned behind her. Rowan, Adian, and Lysandra, bloodied, battered, filthy, grinned like hellions. Or, Aelin said, the flames winking out of her hand, you can take it up with me. Not a word. She wondered whether they were breathing, but Aelin didn't care. She strode off the platform, back through the gate she'd made, and all the way up the barren hillside to the stone castle. She was barely inside the oak doors before she collapsed to her knees and wept. Damn. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah, that was... Y'all really expected me to believe that Kale was gonna die like that. Honestly, I think I would have... Excuse me. I honestly think I would have believed it. But it just didn't... it just didn't feel like it was real. It didn't... I think I was waiting for them to find his body, and then I would have known, because I wasn't gonna cry if he wasn't, like, actually. I don't know. He's barely alive, but he's alive. But he is alive. He is alive. He is alive, though. He is. My fucking muffin got stale. That was too much, y'all. I will not be going live on Saturday. I will be going live on Sunday. I don't know if I can finish the book on Sunday. Hold on. Yeah, no. I know. There's still a lot left. I will not be finishing the book on Sunday. Okay, the next books that are up next, that's the tandem read, right? Where I'm reading 2 books at the same time. Why? Why? Why am I gonna need the Squishmallow for that entire book? The entire book? Oh my God. Do people die Who could die that I'm close to? Oh, actually, a lot of people could die that I'm close to. Lysandra, Adian. Rowan's not dying. Dorian's not dying. Kale, he could still die. He could still end up dying. Aylin's not dying. Who else? Madden's not dying. Her 13's not dying. Who else? Elite is not dying. Not yet, anyway. Let me rephrase that. Not you calling me up. You really caught me there. You really just caught me. I didn't even realize. Look, this is me right now. Actually, hold on. I take that back. I feel like a lot of people could die. A lot of people will die. But I don't know. It just, maybe in like the big battle. But like, how many people can really die before it's just like too much, you know? Which big battle? See, there's a lot of battles. God damn it. And then we still have fucking Maeve to worry about. Like, god damn, can we have just one enemy in all of this? Oh, God. Well, now y'all are just making me scared. This isn't a Court of Thorns and Roses type battles. Yeah, that's what you said whenever I said that Kale wasn't dead. And look at him. He was fine. So, I've learned not to trust y'all when y'all tell me things. Because y'all were over here trying to convince me that Reese was dead too. Whenever he died. This is war. We'll see about that. We'll see about that. I'm feeling pretty okay going into this. I am scared for Kingdom of Ash. I am scared for Kingdom of Ash. That's the one I'm scared of. That's the one I feel like is going to bring me the most emotional turmoil. The ones in between I'm not really worried about. It's the last one you gotta worry about. We'll see about that. Not the bells. Not the bells. Hold on. The bells happened because Daenerys lost absolutely everyone that was close to her. Celaena's not going to lose her entire... Celaena, oh my god. Ayla's not going to lose her entire court, is she? Is she? Not the bells. No. Selena, or why do I keep calling her Selena? Aelin literally reminds me so much of Daenerys. I feel like SJM split up Daenerys' personality, or like Daenerys' like just Daenerys in general, and put her in Manon and put her in Aelin. She put like the leadership, like the bad bitch energy in both of them, but like the queen in Aelin, and then she put like the other, like I feel like they're both very similar to Daenerys, and I could see it. But what happens to Dany at the end? Shut up. What? Now y'all are just fucking scaring me. Anyway, my phone's about to die. So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna eat dinner. We will start, I don't even know what the fuck the book is called, EOS, on next Tuesday. Oh, I can go live on Tuesday because I don't have to babysit on Tuesday. So I can go live on Tuesday. So I'll see y'all for starting the new book. Oh wait, no. Hold on. We'll finish Queen of Shadows on Tuesday. Sorry. And then we'll start Empire of Storm. Thank you. On Wednesday. Okay. Alright. Sounds good. I love y'all. See y'all on Sunday. Bye. Yeah, Sunday, then Tuesday. Finishing Queen of Shadows on Tuesday. Starting Empire of Storms or Empire of something on Wednesday. Bye. Love y'all.